Let's go! Devin White finally gets his ring. In fact, he should get an honorary one for his work for the 2019 LSU team. I think we underrate what he did as an LSU player, because sometimes what happens off the field is more important than what happens on the field. Also, playoff LENNY. We're going to celebrate our boy Booga Nation. So go ahead, subscribe to the channel, like this video. Let's get to it. Now, I'm happy for Fournette and Kevin Minter. And even though he never played a game, Cyril Grayson, I am happy for all of them. But Devin White deserved this more than basically any other LSU Tiger, because he couldn't be a part of the 2019 team. And look, turned out best for all parties, because Devin White wouldn't be a Tampa Bay Buccaneer. He got a little lucky that the Oakland Raiders passed on him at 4. Couldn't you believe it? Clinton Farrell over Devin White. Are you serious? And he also got lucky, obviously, that Tom Brady chose Tampa Bay. But still, LSU also got a little lucky because, well, we wouldn't have gotten to see the greatness of Patrick Queen in the Clemson National Championship game alongside Jacob Phillips, because more than likely Jacob Phillips would have been the linebacker beside Devin White if Devin White stayed for a senior season on the 2019 team. So it worked out well for everyone. But look, Devin White's greatest college performance is something that we never even actually saw for ourselves. On the field, his Texas A&M game is still underrated by all different types of metrics. And the reason why we don't talk about it is because, well, it was a 7-overtime chaotic mess, but we forget that Devin White had 17 freaking tackles. And oh yeah, a forced fumble that resulted into a touchdown. And oh yeah, he should have had the game-winning quarterback pressure that resulted in an interception, but the only reason it was overturned was because Kellen Mond's knee was down when he picked up the football. If you actually watch that game from start to finish, you see how freaking incredible Devin White was in that game. But he doesn't get the credit for that. And he deserves this national spotlight. And he is a big-time personality with a big-time social media following. So it's not the end of the world that he didn't get a 2019 ring, especially now that he has a Super Bowl ring. But it wasn't that Texas A&M game that sticks out to me. It was something else that happened very young in his career. So we all remember the LSU versus Troy game where LSU lost 24-21. And that was a low moment for the Ed Orgeron regime. There was, the disconnect with Orgeron and Aranda and Matt Canada. And then after that loss, all 3 of them were called into Joe Oliva's office, and we had no idea where the future of this program was going. And what about the championship bind? We were throwing out all different types of stuff about this team. This was 2017, pre-Joe Burrow, and it was a really dark moment for all of us. But who was the one that kept the team together? Well, it was Devin White and some other LSU players. So let's take a look back at what actually happened after the game. So the game was very strange, and what we remember was after the game, John Battle, Christian Lacouture, and a few other LSU players spoke out in front of the team. And we don't know if Devin White was one of those guys, but obviously he was one of the leaders in the locker room. And there's something pretty crazy about what actually happened. Now, I've pointed this out before. We tend to underrate players speaking in front of the media. For instance, here's young Devin White speaking to the LSU media after this loss. And by the way, Devin White was not the reason why LSU lost that game. In fact, up to this point, he had already been LSU's best player statistically on either side of the ball. It was not his fault that this happened. But he not only spoke to the media, he said that the players on the team need to step up their play. He publicly called out everyone on the team to take their play to the next level. Now remember, this is first-year starter Devin White. Probably 18, 19, maybe 20 years of age here. And he's doing this with other seniors on the team. So if you do that, guess what? Well, you better step up your play as well. But that's the thing. Devin White was already playing at an extremely high level. But there is another level to this. So once again, as you see here, we need to start studying more. LSU, Devin White laments some mental lapses. So this was said after the game in that press conference. But it was actually not until SEC Media Days the next year that we learned something pretty fascinating. That after the Troy game, Ed Orgeron called Devin White into his office and said, I need you to be more vocal and I need you to get the guys on the same page. So the guy who had been the best player on the team, the guy that is clearly not responsible for the problems that LSU had versus Troy, Ed Orgeron said, look, I need you to do more. I need you to take your game to the next level. I need you to hold everybody accountable. And Devin White had already said what he said, but Ed Orgeron put even more on Devin White's plate. And I'm glad Ed Orgeron did, because that could backfire. That is not something you should do to most first-year starter players, true sophomore players. A lot of players are not mature enough to take that lesson in, to humble themselves and say, look, I might be playing great, but it's still my responsibility to take this team to an even higher level. I don't think we can truly grasp how crazy that is. And as many of you know, Devin White did take his game to another level. So here is the game log. The Troy game, he had 11 tackles. But remember, the very next week, LSU had to go to Gainesville to play the Gators. 13 tackles, 1 tackle for loss, 1 sack, 1 pass deflection. And if you remember correctly, there was something, there was some trash talk between Felipe Franks and Devin White. There was some chatter, and Devin White still backed all of it up. And LSU won on the road against Florida in a close, drag-it-out affair. And that tells you everything you need to know about Devin White. And you see the next few games. Auburn, 15 tackles in a home victory, 2 for loss. Then another win versus Ole Miss. Then the loss against Alabama. But then to finish the season, 14, 11, 13, and 6 to close it out. 133 tackles, still one of the highest marks in the history of LSU football. And that lets you know everything you need to know about this guy. He took his game to an even higher level. And this was after the Troy game. He could have packed it in, but he kept on fighting. But this is what's very underrated about Devin White as an LSU player. What happens a lot is you have a huge season as a true sophomore or a true freshman. So many times in the history of LSU football, elite players can't follow that up. It is hard to healthily return the next season and be great, and that is exactly what Devin White did. Not only did he return the next season, he returned an even better player. And as you see here, 2018, started all 13 games again. He finished with 10 fewer tackles, but the key stat here is let's go back here to 2017, he had 37 solo, 96 assisted tackles, where in 2018, his solo tackles went up and his assisted tackles went down. So he actually was better in 2018 than he was in 2017. You see the 17 tackle game versus Texas A&M. But then even more impressively, when he knew he was going to be a top 10 pick, and I know it was still early in the player opt-out for the bowl game thing, but that was still a thing, Devin White said, look, I'm flying out with my team and playing my final game because I'm freaking Devin White. 8 solo tackles, 1 pass deflection in a bowl game win versus UCF where he had nothing to gain, but he came back. You know, of all the LSU players that have opted out, right? Devin White didn't do it. He kept playing, and that's who he is. And he deserves a lot more credit for his LSU career, not necessarily for what happened on the field, but what happened off of it. So now let's talk some about Leonard Fournette. 1 Super Bowl, this from Shea Dixon. 1 Super Bowl, 6-1 record, that 1 loss to Jaguars versus New England. But just consistency you see here. And ironically, he was the reason why the Saints were knocked out. I mean, he made so many big plays on 3rd down versus New Orleans. Obviously, the touchdown in the red zone. And he deserves all the credit in the world. A lot like Devin White, came back after his elite 2015 season. And in 2016, he wasn't as dominant. He was very hurt throughout the course of that season. But he was still All-SEC, and he was still, actually pretty good, despite Darius Geis and Darrell Williams also being there. So, Leonard Fournette, one of the greatest LSU Tigers of all time. Devin White the week after versus Florida. Well, ironically, his great linebacker performance against Florida on the road was not the greatest LSU linebacker performance on the road versus Florida. That, in fact, belongs to Kevin Minter, who had 20 freaking tackles versus the Gators back in 2012. And, of course, Kevin Minter, also a Super Bowl champion. Really quickly here, this was interesting. Patrick Peterson is leaving Arizona. The timing of this is very interesting considering the big game was last night. And I totally agree here with T-Bob talking about his former teammate. Going to Tampa or KC, and that's a lock. And that makes a lot of sense. Obviously, if you go to Kansas City, he gets to reunite with Tyrann Mathieu and gets to compete for a Super Bowl. And if he goes to Tampa Bay, he reunites with his former defensive coordinator, Todd Bowles. We had a fun Super Bowl live chat. Special thanks to Jared dropping a 50 burger on the Super Chat, helping out with Booger's Meds. Hey, I love that. Thank you so much, Jared. Obviously, the next live stream, Tuesday night. Let's go. It is Power Hour LSU. Boom. Bum, bum, bum. Congrats, DW40. Oh. I think we don't have leftover pizza. I don't know what we're having tonight. Tuna steaks. I think we are doing tuna steaks.